Okay. So there we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome again. Thank you very much for being with us. And I just want to say a couple of words of introduction before we begin the reading of Megillat HaShoah. As people were coming in, someone asked, is this the first year we're doing it? In fact, this is something we've been doing in the community. Different congregations have been part of the reading in different constellations over the past several years. We've been doing it here in town, maybe 4 years, could be 5 years, reading Megillat HaShoah in community. And because it's still a little bit of a new thing, both to our community and I think to the Jewish world as a way of commemorating those who have been lost to the Shoah, I always want to give a very brief introduction, even though in so many ways, I believe, for those who have not read it before, heard it read, you'll see that the Megillah really speaks for itself. So before I just share a few words, let me just say this. I want to really thank our partners for this event tonight. Thank you to our congregational partners, to Adat Shalom, Beth Shalom, B'nai Israel, B'nai Moshe, Shari Tzedek, and my congregation, Beth Am. I am Rabbi Rubenstein from Beth Am, and we also want to thank the Holocaust Memorial Center, and that is partnered with us each year as well. And during the reading a couple of times, I'm going to share the Holocaust Center's website and encourage you to join them tomorrow night, which is the end of Yom HaShoah. Tonight begins Yom HaShoah. Tomorrow is the end of Yom HaShoah, and they're having their ceremony and observance tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, and you're strongly encouraged to visit with them as well and to be a part of that. Let me, before I lose the opportunity, because I know many people have joined us just in the last few minutes, I'm going to share again a link for those who would like, the Megillah, which we're going to read, can be found at the link that I just put in the chat. I share it with you. We're going to have it up on the screen, of course, but for some people, it's more comfortable to be able to control it themselves, look at the Hebrew, look at the English, move it back and forth. You're only going to be able to see a couple of lines at a time on the screen because we wanted the print to be large enough that you can actually see it. So Yom HaShoah HaGvura, Holocaust and Heroes Remembrance Day, begins tonight, and it's really a way of honoring those who perished in the Shoah, in the Holocaust, and honoring the lives of those who survived. And as I feel like I say each year, I don't think that the Megillah that we're going to read is meant to be educational in the sense it's not going to teach you any new fact about the Shoah, though it is important to continue to learn. It is really a commemoration. It is something which is supposed to conjure up those who we've lost and the magnitude of that loss for us as a Jewish community and the loss that the whole world endured through the Shoah. The reason there is a Megillah, the reason this Megillah was created was really for this, for in particular with the idea that synagogue communities are bearers of the memory of the Jewish people. And we read Megillot on a whole variety of holidays. We joke about, the whole Megillah, that's for Purim. But the truth is, we read a Megillah on Pesach just a few days ago, Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs. There's the Megillah of Eicha, which we read on Tisha B'Av, where we have another remembrance of really tragic events, the destruction of the first and second temples, as well as other events. But this Megillah is in keeping with that, even though it's a new Megillah, because this event is not exactly new, the Shoah, but certainly new in the context of Jewish history. And it allows us to place this memory within the heart of the congregational community, within the heart of the Jewish community. And because the synagogue has been the bearer of this memory for generations and generations, unparalleled as an institution, we hope that by embedding the memory of the Shoah, the memory of the victims of the Shoah into the synagogue community, we'll be able to bear that memory into the future, to continue to revisit the lessons that we should learn from it, but really to remember those who were the victims of it, and to ponder that at least this one day of the year even as it impacts the Jewish community on each day of the year. You'll notice that we're going to read the Megillah, some in Hebrew, some in English. You'll notice that two parts are going to be read with Eicha trope, the trope from the Book of Lamentations that, as I mentioned, is read on Tisha B'Av. That trope, that sound, is the sound of mourning for Jews, and it's appropriate. And this Megillah was written with the special notation that Torah readers and Haftarah readers and Megillah readers use, just so that it could be read with Eicha trope. So when you hear that sound, that's what it is. And with that, we are now going to move to the reading itself. I'm going to light a candle between each, before each chapter. And before we begin chapter 1, I'm going to light our first candle here. As I said, the text is going to be shared as it is now on your screen. And we are glad to have, for chapter 1, our two readers. Excuse me just one moment. First, we'll have Arlene Millman from B'nai Moshe, and then Marty Liebman from Adat Shalom. Arlene, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Chapter 1, in the beginning. So spoke the chronicler. Long is the history of the eternal people, extending for millennium, including good years and bad years, tranquil years and dreadful years, in its own land and in diaspora lands, among the nations, and as a free people. It enjoyed long periods of repose during which it contributed of its endowments to fellow mortals, bestowing upon them the Sabbath and faith in one God, the book of books, and the teachings of the prophets. At times, however, in darkened and difficult days, it struggled under the burdens imposed by vanquishers and subjugators. It was afflicted, body and soul, by religious wars and persecutions, burnings at the stake, and being crowded into ghettos, blood libels and pogroms, expulsions and exiles, degradation and derision. The people had neither security nor tranquility, and the monster of Jew hatred again and again threatened to swallow it whole, rose up against it in every generation, attempting to destroy it. Nevertheless, the people gritted its teeth, accepted the heavenly judgment, and groaning, even at times stretched its neck on the sacrificial altar. Homeless and hunted, it sought a safe haven, a refuge for resting a while, until the time of wrath had passed.
מה שאירע לו לעם ישראל באירופה הנאצית אין לו שם, ומה שעלתה לבניו ולבנותיו אי אפשר לפה לפרשו. אין ספור בני אדם הוגלו מבתיהם, נקרעו ממשפחותיהם, הושפלו עד עפר ושועבדו עד מוות. 6,000,000 ברואים בצלם נחנקו ונשרפו או נורו. נקברו חיים או מתו ברעב, בצמא ובקור. הפעם פערה המפלצת את פיה לבלי חוק, בצבחה מקפיאה דם, וביקשה לעקור את הכל. בלא רחם יצאה להשמיד, להרוג ולאבד את העם כולו, מן הבאים בימים ועד לעוברים שבמעי אמותיהם. רכבות אין ספור דהרו דחוסות על המחנות, ועשן הארובות התעמר אל האלוהים. אך השמיים היו נחושת והרקיע ברזל. שקשוק גללי הקירונות התערב בנביחות הכלבים, ואל טריקת דלתות הברזל הצטרף רעש הנעליים המסמרות. כי תזמורת ענק דורסנית החרישו כל אלה, ואת כל הדממה הדקה אשר בקע מליבות מתי המעט. חסידי אומות העולם אשר נגע בהם דבר האלוהים, זכרה להם אלוהים זאת לטובה. הרבה כבר ראיתי והרבה עוד אראה, אך מה שנגלה לעיני שם לא אוכל לשוב ולראות. כל המילים שנבראו ושיבראו בכל השפות כולן לא יצליחו לתאר ולו מעט ממה שנגלה לעיני. ואף זאת עדה לא אוכל לשכוח, ולא יהיה בי הכוח להבין.
We read chapter 2, we'll light the second candle. Chapter 2 will be read by Judith Adler from Beth Shalom and Lindsay Schlossel on behalf of Sharit Seda.
The earth is filled with chaos and confusion from the journal of a journey to another world. I was part of a small delegation of journalists that stole into the ghetto in order to see what was happening behind its walls. I stayed there for 8 hours, during which I aged 10 years. On our way there, we stopped at a church to worship since it was Sunday. When the last notes of the organ had faded, we listened to the words of the priest. He spoke of suffering and affliction, of love and compassion, of pity and kindness, and sent us on our way with the blessing, "May God be with you." But when we passed the guardhouses placed in the walls surrounding the ghetto, we were left with the suffering and the affliction, them alone. As we entered, a cart was coming toward us, pushed and pulled by 3 men. Bloated corpses were heaped upon it, their heads bouncing to a rhythm determined by muddy ruts in the road, as if they were greeting us. Thus, for the first time, we met death's partner, famine. It was impossible not to feel its presence in every corner, and it was the force endlessly propelling streams of weakened people through the streets, their faces filled with despair. Wherever you looked, terrifying sights, a dead body, its face covered by a newspaper, and a man hastily removing its overcoat while digging in its pockets with anticipation. A young girl holding tightly her infant sister, who was weeping out of hunger listlessly, maybe dying, maybe sleeping. An elder crowned with tefillin, stretching out a feeble hand, his eyes reflecting the peace he had made with the most dreadful of all. A boy who had tried to smuggle potato skins into the ghetto, surrounded by a group of guards, reveling with coarse laughter as they stripped him before he was beaten to death.
Just making sure I'm starting at Kfutza, right? Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay. Kfutza shel tz'irim hitgadedu lemo luach muda'ot, achat mehen ktuva b'Yiddish. Mashka et tish omet libi. Hosbar lanu shezo hoda'a al concert sheya'arech bo bayom. Makala ktana v'chagnar boded. Mada'ot acherot sipru al si'orei Torah v'hirtzaot be'anyanei dioma. Ha'im haya bechucham shel ele lehashtik v'lo l'rega. Et hara'ev hamnaser o lachanok et ha'ema mifnei ha'atid. Minyan she'avo hayehudim et hakoach lehabit kach ba'einav shel hamalach hamashchit. Pagashnu gam ba'anshe hayoden rat ra'ashe hakalal. Hamlalim asher beyadam hofdu chaye achehem ve'achyotehem mibli yochul lehoshiam. Shuv hotal alehem le'argen transport shel anashim no'e hamashiyot kvar ra'amo b'kikar hamirkazit. Bid chifot utzakot nidchaku amahut v'yaldehen kshishim she'anyatehem beyadehem. Chulim v'nakim u'tshoshim al piha hafa'or shel hamashait. Uv'einei chulam imam misyatet bedarken al tachanat harakevet hasmucha hotiru achrehen hamashiot za'aka alemet. Mehula ba'ashan shachar vida'a v'da'it ko'evet. Ki gam machar v'gam machartayim yachazur machazeh ze al atzmo ad nashimato ha'achrona shel hageto. Hachazara al rechova harashi shel ha'ir al hamona v'sha'anu umschara utzchuka ha'evira oti ba'achat me'olam le'olam. Gader dakika b'chama she'arim hifrodu bein olamot kashonim. Mayodim darei ha'olam ha'achad al shechanehem shebe'olam ha'achad. Ve'im asaper hayakshivu, ve'im yakshivu hayachlu la'amin, ve'im ya'aminu ha'im lo yansu la'aspir o letaher et matzponam be'tamim shonim umshonim uchshoya she'aleini lama ara leYehudim kol zot ma ashiv.
Thank you very much. I'm going to light the candle for chapter 3. Chapter 3 will be read by Gail Offen from Beth Am and Udi Kappen from B'nai Israel.
Chapter 3, The Darkness Spread Over All. Written upon a scrap of paper found between two wooden beds. Gertrude is my name. There were many Gertrudes in our town, but in this long, cold barracks, there is no Gertrude but me. There is an Anushka here who comes from the Ukraine, and Gittel from Poland, Helen from Germany, and Grazia from Greece, and a continuing long list of those who once were women. What cruel, callous magnet drew us here from all corners of the continent and cast all of us into one mold? Wooden shoes and a dress of coarse fabric, a blanket to cover our body in a cold that knows no mercy, and a tin plate and a spoon that could never hold enough to satisfy the incessant gnawing hunger. The past is becoming blurred, replaced only by the present, today, right now, this moment. The sewing machine, a portion of fall soup, the lineup where some of us collapse and from which others are plucked away to disappear, accompanied by shrieks and dogs and no one knows where. The present fills all our existence. About the future, no one speaks, and with difficulty, I remember the past. Oh, how short-sighted and innocent we were. We rejected the advice to abandon the homeland, to emigrate to the distant east, and we hid ourselves from the signs, no Jews allowed. Our ears we sealed from hearing the hateful speeches, for they were just words, and what can words really accomplish? With all our might, we wanted to believe that if only we would humble ourselves a short while, the storm would pass and be no more. Even after the night of the burning synagogues, when the streets were covered with shattered glass, we continued hoping for the best, since nothing worse could come to pass. And after all, everyone was cultured there.
אוי, לא לשוטה העיוור, שלא ידע מה צופן העתיד. היה זה יום שישי בערב. ישבנו בסלון, ומנפרד, אבי הנכה בכיסא גלגלים, הצטרף לשירת המקהלה שהושמעה ברדיו. לפתע נפרצו הדלת, והם נכנסו, שחורי בגד ומצוחצחי מגף. את אבא דחפו לחדר הסמוך, ועלינו ציוו לארוז מזוודה בתוך 10 דקות. אתן יוצאות למקום מוגן ובטוח, אמרו, מהר, מהר. ולאחר מכן, רק תמונות חטופות וקולות מקוטעים. ירייה בודדת מבתיהם החלולים של השכנים, כיכר העיר הקבועה, זעקת הפרידה של אמא, המשאית המצניחה, הרכבת שאין בה טיפת אוויר לנשימה, הצריף הארוך שרק מיטות אצבו, והקפו חמוצת הפנים. את שערותינו גילחו כשהוכנסנו לצריף, ובמקום הכוכב הצהוב המשושה, צרבו על ידינו מספר כחול. ומאותו רגע רק לתפור ולתפור, מבוקר עד ערב, ללא מנוח, יום אחר יום, כובעים, מעילים, חולצות ומכנסיים, שיתאימו למגף המצוחצח. בתחילה עוד שאלתי, למה? למה אני? למה אנחנו? למה עכשיו? אך חדלתי מלשאול. השאלה מכאיבה יותר באין לה תשובה. הלילה ייקחו את כולנו למקום אחר. כך סיפרה הקפו, ולא הוסיפה דבר, אך פניה קדרו. אני כותב את כל זאת על דף הנייר, ואם ימצא אותו אי פעם בן אנוש, אולי יהיה בכוחו לשאול על מה שלא.
For chapter 4, we light the 4th candle. Chapter 4 will be read by Becca Goodman, representing the Holocaust Memorial Center, by Shelley Slagter-Katzman from B'nai Moshe.
Chapter 4, Confronting the Abyss. The last words of Yaakov David, Ben Yoel Tzvi Halevi. 4 times was I born, and once already have I died. My first birth was accompanied by the joyful voices of my parents and my 8 brothers and sisters when I came into the world with the help of God. May he be blessed 25 years ago. I was born 3 other times over the past 10 years, during which time I also died once. After that death, no death could ever frighten me. The second time I was born on the night of the selection, when they gathered us, all the males in town, to the central square. The stars had disappeared and only the yellow patches flickered in the darkness. We were told to form a long line and strip to the waist. One by one, we passed by the light of a dim oil lamp near a devil dressed in black who was with the wave of a hand directed to the left or to the right. At once I realized that the strong and the sturdy were being sent to one side, and the young and the aged to the other. Hastily, I filled my shoes with dirt to gain a few centimeters in height. Swelling my chest, I even walked on my toes as I passed him. I was sent with the sturdy. Later, we heard the shots, and I knew that my life had been given to me as a gift. Blessed be his name. The third time I was born, when 1,000 of us were taken to walk in front of soldiers on a battlefield. The area was full of mines, and we formed a living wall before the troops. Each and every day, our number diminished as comrades ripped apart were left behind as food for the birds of the heavens and the beasts of the field. 78 of us survived the march. I felt that our lives began anew when we finally reached the barn where we were favored with our daily portion of thin soup. Blessed be the Lord each day. The fourth time, I was born later that night. I had left the barn for the yard behind it, where I managed to catch a sight of a spark from a match and the sickening smile of the one who had lit it. Since the living wall had fulfilled its mission, it was no longer needed. The barn went up in flames, and all my comrades soared heavenward on the flaming pyre. At sacrificial offering ascended to God. May he be blessed. Whoever has been born
We'll continue in the Hebrew.
Yeah.
Verse 22.
מי שנולד 4 פעמים לא ימות פעם אחת בלבד. מותי בא עליי לאחר ברחתי ממקום השרפה והדפסתי מידי המקומיים וצורפתי את רכבת שיצאה אל העבודה המשחררת. תזמורת קיבלה את אותנו וכולנו הובלנו, סבון ומגבת בידינו לשטוף את גופנו המיוזע. ריח של בשר שרוף הטריף את חושינו. הסבון הבער בידינו והמזרע תזמורת מנגנת. ברחמי האל עליי שלפתי ברגע האחרון מן השורה ולא הצטרפתי אל ההמונים הערומים שנדחפו אל חדר בפירוט. הדלת נטרקה ברעש אדירים ומן החדר בקע קול אשר השפה איננה יודעת לתארו. שריקת זרימתו של גז נורח דוטה בבליל של שמע ישראל וממלא אדוני אלוהינו ולמדרמיה אדוני אחד ותתלה ספחות דואחות ושוקטות וכל דממה דקה. כאן התחיל תפקידי לסלק את הגופות, לעקור את השיני הזהב, לדחוס את המתים על פי התנור. שהכרתי את שיניו של אחי לייזר, שלא ראיתי כמה שנים, מת ליבי בקרבי, גופי ממשיך לחיות, אני מת, מהלך. אדוני נתן לי חיים, ואדוני כבר לקחם, יהי שם אדוני מבורך. כמה עמל ריבונו של עולם, כדי שנאבד את אמונתנו בו, אך על אפו ועל חמתו לא עשינו זאת. כשאמות בפעם הנוספת, אל קראו עלי ואל נעבדו, שאין מוות אחר מוות. אל תהינו גם לשאול למה, מה שלא עשיתי אני אל יעשו האחרים בגללי.
Prior to the reading of the 5th chapter, we light the 5th candle. Chapter 5 will be read by Josh Adler using the Eicha trope, reading for Beth Shalom, and Carrie Alterman reading on behalf of Shari Tzedek.
Ad kol mishamayim merachet omeret al ele ani bochio al arecha shel Gertrude shenikru mizeh befirut al ele ani bochio al Gertrude vanushka kitol vehelna v'gerusha shekalo kachod v'machanos avod avodo al ele ani bochio al anshe hayudin rot al okavu hayud al yehudio shenidrishu lamale tafkid she'ein odom yochol lamalo al ele ani bochio Al Yaakov David ben Yuel Tzvi Halevi Shemei Pamayim Benolad Arba Al Ele Ani Bochio Al Tishameot Esrim Shanayim Chaberov Shalu Hashamayim Pasadot HaMokshim Al Ele Ani Bochio Ashivim Shivta Hanetzolim Sha'aforot Zavur B'Matabein Al Ele Ani Bochio Al Ezer Sha'af B'Mazvi'im Shabach Lo Motov Al Ro'o Al Echov Oker Shenit Hazahov Umogufo Al Ele Ani Bochio.
For these do I weep. and for the millions crowded in ghettos and in detention camps, for those wandering in forests and those hidden in attics and in underground bunkers, for those who found refuge in the bosom of another faith, or those who lost their God, for those who were given over to experiments at the hands of wild beasts called doctors and scientists, for those who died of hunger and of thirst, smothered to death in freight trains or in gas chambers, shot, buried alive, or cremated, for those who were brought out to be killed by hanging so that they would be seen, and for those who sanctified God's name and the name of the people Israel, refusing to be subdued, fighting to the death, for those who lost their homes, their dignity, and their hope, and for those left alive to live the horror anew, day after day, moment after moment. For these do I weep, for infants who never learned to say mommy, for boys and girls whose youth was stolen from them, who withered before coming to blossom, for young men and women who never were blessed beneath the wedding canopy, for the elderly denied the privilege of a gracious old age, for the orchestras and for the music, and for the world's beauty whose rainbow of colors was lost, replaced by only brown and gray and black. For all these do I weep. I struggled so hard before the veiled curtain, before the merciless, merciful, and gracious one of great kindness and truth. How I pled and how I begged, how I wanted to understand. Was all of this known on high? Was this the decree of God who is filled with compassion? This was the reward of such a nation? But there was no sound and no response, only an exasperating silence. The Most High abides in secret. God dwells in the shadow of silence. Deep, hidden, and awesome are the events. No one understands them, not even echoes of the heavenly voice.
Ready for the final chapter of Megillat HaShoah, chapter 6. Before we begin chapter 6, we will light a sixth candle. As is traditional to light the six candles during remembrance for Yom HaShoah. This last candle is lit in particular for the memory of the 1.5 million children killed during the Shoah. Chapter 6 will be read by Cheryl Berlin from B'nai Israel and Jeff Weinfeld from Bethel.
Chapter 6, Let There Be Light Again. Again did the chronicler speak. At the edges of the night, the first rays of dawn could be discerned. They shone upon the remnants of human beings in striped clothing who stared at their surroundings with dead eyes. They have forgotten how to be happy, and their bodies reject any food offered them. Bulldozers thrust into gigantic pits, thousands of thin, naked corpses that fall one atop the other, their limbs withered. In camps of the uprooted, circled human streams, searching in despair for members of their families, and they were afraid to hope lest their hope be lost. The unfortunates who tried to return to their homes found in them hostile neighbors from time to time, and more than once they were saved only by a miracle from murder following murder. People who did not know or who had sought not to know, who refused to believe or who forbade believing, stood with tearful eyes, not knowing where to direct their gaze or how to cleanse their conscience. Slowly, people returned to their homes and family members were reunited. People married again and children were born. Wave upon wave poured into the east and the state of Israel arose, and centers of Jewish life flourished throughout the world. Trains traveled to resorts once again, and orchestras were making joyous music in all corners of the land. Perhaps this is the way in which heaven sought some consolation for those who suffered and mourned.
גילויי גבורה של עזי הנפש העלו על נס וקדיש נאמר על המתים. ספרי זיכרונות נכתבו ואנדרטאות הוקמו. ולאבלים נמצא סוף סוף מקום לבכות בו את מתיהם. פושעים באו על אנשם, נכי גוף ונפש זכו לעזרה, אך בכל אלה לא היה כדי לכבול את מלאך החלומות. הממשיך להביא את הניצולים לילה אחר לילה, ולא כדי להשתיק את כל המצפון, המנקר ותובע הסבר לרשות, השטנית ולאטימות הלב, ושלל השאלות, ריבונו של עולם, למה? למה? למה דווקא אנחנו? למה דווקא הם? למה עכשיו? למה כך? נותרו תלויות בחללו של עולם, מרחפות מעל כל מעשה אנוש ומענה אין. ימים יגידו מה למדנו, רק הזמן יגלה אם הקשבנו באמת לקולו של דם הנרצחים הצועק אלינו מן האדמה. אל תתאבלו יותר מדי, אך אל תשקעו בשכחה של אדישות. אל תניחו לימי החושך שישובו. לכו וגם מחו את הדמעה. אל תמחלו ואל תסלחו, אל תנסו להבין. לימדו לחיות ללא מענה. בדמנו חיו.
Do not mourn too much, but do not sink into the forgetfulness of apathy. Do not allow days of darkness to return. Weep, but wipe the tears away. Do not absolve and do not exonerate. Do not attempt to understand. Learn to live without an answer. Through our blood, live. It is a bit peculiar in a certain way to have a Megillah that is read in Hebrew and in English, and neither of which was the primary language of the victims of the Shoah, the Jewish victims of the Shoah. And it seems important to at least have a little bit of Yiddish as part of this remembrance. And we're really thankful to have Daniela Harpaz-Mechnikov with us, who's going to sing Unser Shtetl brennt.
Es brennt, Brüderlech, es brennt. Oi, unser arm Städtel nebach brennt. Böse Winden mit ihr Gossen, reißen, brechen und zerblosen. Starker noch die Flammen, als schon brennt. Und steht und guckt, das soll sie mit verlegter Hand. Und steht und guckt, das soll sie, unser Städtel brennt. Es brennt, Brüderlech, brennt. Oi, unser arm Städtel nebach brennt. Schon die Feuerzungen, das ganze Städtel eingeschlungen und die böse Winden huschen, unser Städtel brennt. Und steht und guckt, das soll sich mit verlegter Hand. Und steht und guckt, das soll sich unser Städtel brennt.
Right, Cantor, if you would just put the translation of that on the screen for a moment, please. Leave it there for just a moment. Thank you, everyone. Rabbi Cantor, if I could ask you to unshare for the moment now. Thank you. Chazan Gross from Dat Shalom is now going to lead us in the Isker Prayer. And we're going to ask those who are able, I'm going to put that up on the screen, and we'll ask those who are able to please stand for that. Excuse me one moment.
Isker Elohim nishmot הקדושים והטהורים שהומתו ושנהרגו ושנשחטו ושנשרפו ושנטבעו ושנחנקו על קידוש השם על ידי הצוררים הנאציים יימח שמם וזכרם בעבור שבלי נדר אתן צדקה בדם בישכר זה תהיינה נפשותיהם צרורות בצרור החיים אם נשמות אברהם יצחק ויעקב שרה רבקה רחל ולאה ואם שאר צדיקים וצדקניות שבגן עדן ונאמר
Rabbi Cantor, if I could ask you to reshare the screen now, please. We're going to turn to the Amale Rachamim. It's going to be recited by Ron Natus from Bethlehem. Sorry, Ron, would you unmute yourself one more time, please? Thank you.
מלא רחמים, שוכן במרומים, המצוי מלאכה נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה. במעלות קדושים, קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע, מזהירים, מזהירים. נשים וטף, שנטבחו, שנחנקו, ושנשרפו, ושנהרגו. בגן עדן, בגן עדן די, בגן עדן די מנוחתם, אנה בעל הרחמים. הסתירם בסתר כנפך לעולמים. וצרור בצרור החיים לנשמותיהם, אדוני הוא נחלתם, ינוחו בשלום על משכבותיהם, ונאמר Amen.
We turn to Mourner's Kaddish, and we do have a bit of a challenge for Mourner's Kaddish with so many voices, but we will invite people in just a moment to unmute themselves and join in to Mourner's Kaddish. Of course, in some ways it may go without saying, but I will say it anyway, that traditionally we say Kaddish only for specific relatives, right? Those who we would sit Shiva for, our immediate relatives, a parent, a sibling, a spouse, a child. But it is certainly the custom in our community that there are moments where, I should say, first of all, there may be people here who are remembering people who were killed during the Shoah. But I think there are also many of us who did not have relatives who passed away or who were killed during the Shoah. But they are part of us. And especially in Yom HaShoah, we take the opportunity to honor them through the reciting of Mourner's Kaddish. Everyone is welcome to join me. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah Yalma v'yibrach v'yitei v'yamlech malchuteh v'chayechon yomechon v'chayeh v'chol Beit Yisrael v'agala v'zman v'ri v'yimru v'menu Yehei Shmei Rabbah Rav Olamei Ulamaya Yitbarach v'yishabach v'yitpa'ar v'yikavod v'yitaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitpalal shenei dushav rifu ha'elam v'chata v'shirata v'chata v'nechemata v'yalma v'yimru Yehei shloma rava min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yal Yisrael v'yimru Shalom Shalom Leinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru.
Amen.
Though I will ask you in a moment to stand again, but for a moment I'll invite you to sit, and we can unshare the screen for a moment. And I'll ask people to either, you can put yourself on mute for another moment, that would probably be best. Before we conclude, we're going to be concluding with Hatikva, as we have each year that we've recited Megillat HaShoah. But before we do that, a few words, but also a few words of thanks. First, I want to again thank the congregations who have participated this year, as well as the Holocaust Memorial Center. As I mentioned at the beginning of our evening, the Holocaust Center here in town each year, of course, has a memorial. I've just put the website of the Holocaust Center into the chat. I'm sure many of you could find it on your own, but they are having their yearly memorial tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock, and you are encouraged to join them. And as I said at the beginning, I don't think that the Megillat HaShoah teaches you the facts. But the facts are important too. It's just not this particular way of remembering. But we have a real important institution, the Holocaust Memorial Center in town, where you can learn the facts and more. And of course, there are many, many opportunities, but this is an important institution in our community, and we appreciate them, and we appreciate them partnering with us as well. Just one word about reciting Hatikva. You know, we just came from Pesach, and I talked to our congregation about the role of Israel as we think about our freedom today. And I think there's a too easy way of thinking about the reciting of Hatikva, as if, you know, you say Megillat HaShoah, we remember all of the tragedy that was the Shoah, that some people still are living with, and of course many passed away, died from. It's not as if we say Hatikva and we celebrate the state of Israel and all is well with the world. We wish that were the case, but neither do we want to forget about the role that the state of Israel plays in our lives as Jews today, and the life of the Jewish people today. And so even though, again, I think it is sometimes too easy a connection, the Shoah and therefore the state of Israel, that's for a longer conversation. But we don't want to miss the opportunity to honor one of the central role of Israel in our lives and in our Jewish lives today. And so we are going to end with a sense of hope and the word hope of Hatikva as we conclude tonight. We're going to put the text back up. Invite Ron Natus. He's going to lead us for Hatikva. We're not going to ask everyone to open up their sound. That would be probably not a good idea. A little too much sound all at once. But I will invite people to stand as we do for Hatikva.
Kol balevav penima nefesh Yehudi homia ulfatei mizrach kadima ayin lezion tzofia. Od lavda tikvateinu, hatikva bat shnot alpayim, liyotam chofshi be'artzeinu, eretz Tzion Yerushalayim, liyotam chofshi be'artzeinu, eretz Tzion Yerushalayim.